When it comes to being on air in sports broadcasting, there's a lot that goes into it. Not only can it be a struggle to get the job in the first place, but keeping that job and progressing from local to network sports can be challenging. My guest on this episode will tell us all about his journey, how he's built relationships in his career, and how he engages fans. After all, that's what drives sports. All that and more, next on Sports in the Making. Thank you for joining me on Sports in the Making, a podcast where we find out about what people in the sports and sports broadcasting industry do, how they've made an impact in the sports world, and how it all comes together. I'm your host, Don Cardona, and this is episode number 19. I met this week's guest while working at Universal Sports Network in 2012, and we have become good friends over the past few years. We've worked many Olympic sporting events together, studio shows, and shows that took us across the Atlantic. His name is Nick Gismondi, and he's been in sports broadcasting for more than 25 years. He started in sports broadcasting at just 15 years old, calling high school games for his local radio station, and has experienced the ups and downs of being on-air talent for networks such as Fox Sports, AT&T Sportsnet, Universal Sports Network, the Olympic Channel, ESPN, and NBC Sports. He's currently host and reporter for World Team Tennis on CBS, and is the Chicago Blackhawks rinkside reporter for NBC Sports Chicago, and he's been nominated for a number of Emmys. We'll talk about how he got into the business, what kinds of challenges he's faced in this industry, and how he places a lot of importance on developing relationships within the business, and most importantly, with the fans. This is my conversation with my friend and colleague, Nick Gismondi. All right, just down the road from me here in Colorado is Nick Gismondi. We are practicing social distancing because he could have just come right over to my studio. But welcome aboard, Nick. Thank you for joining me, my buddy.
Oh, it's good to be on. I've long time listener, first time interviewer. Though I feel like I feel like in Chicago earlier in the year I was your test subject for
you
this.
Were.
So glad it went well, and glad we're on. Glad the episodes keep rolling out, my friend.
And just for my viewers or my listeners, I did talk with Nick about this concept prior to launching it, and I had some snags that held me up about 2 months, and so finally I'm able to catch up with you. And now life has kind of taken a weird turn here with this COVID thing. So Nick, what have you been doing since sports shut down?
It's I know for a fact I'm not built for this kind of isolation. I enjoy being around people. I enjoy interacting. And man, I sure do love sports, but I think what this has done is, for me at least, it's put me on the forefront of recognizing how much I do appreciate what I get to do for a living, and I do certainly appreciate what all of those people that keep our society running do for a living and keeping us safe and keeping us healthy. But yeah, this has been weird for me. It's been a lot of Netflix. It's been a lot of Amazon Prime, both the shopping and the watching, and it's been a lot of Apple TV. So I think I've crushed through absolutely everything of substance on all of those. In fact, you just turned me on to a new series, so I got that to look forward to in the next couple of days. And a friend of mine stars in a Netflix series, so I got to watch his handiwork on a series called Daybreak. My buddy Colin Ford's the lead in that. So yeah, it's just been a lot of that, and I'm trying to stay healthy. I'm trying to eat right and try to limit pantry visits and do the body weight workouts. But I miss gyms and I miss people and I miss sports desperately right now.
Yeah. Well, from my introduction, you are the ice or rink reporter for the Chicago Blackhawks, and you do many other things with them as well. You're also involved in World Team Tennis, and a lot of different things are on your plate right now. But what's it like working for one of the original 6 hockey clubs?
Oh, wow. It's I actually really love this question because it's dream come true stuff. I've been a broadcaster for 25 years, and the goal when I started this, when I was 15 years old, 14, 15 years old, was always to be an announcer primarily in the NHL. And this is just my 3rd season in the league, and it's my first with the Blackhawks. And it was absolutely everything and more that I hoped it would be. It's that organization. I try to tell people how first class they are. And I think the best way that I can describe it is white glove. Everything they do is top notch, from how they treat you as an employee to how they treat you as a person to how they treat your family and your friends. I'm a big family guy, and I feel like I've been in that organization my whole life. So not only are they top notch in terms of people, but I mean, they're one of the best sports franchises in the world, one of the most iconic. And that's top down from, from the owner Rocky to his son Danny and everybody in the front office, from the Jay Blunks of the world to Pete Hassan and Adam Ragowin and basically everybody that I work with on a regular basis. It's unbelievable. I get to interact very closely with the communications department, and that's primarily a gentleman by the name of Adam Ragowin, John Steinmiller, Mike Hearn, and Will Chuckerman and Lindsey Stroop. And my interactions with them on a daily basis in high stress moments it speaks to the character of that organization because of how calm and professional and how perfectly they all work together. And it's a well-oiled machine over there in Chicago. And I thought I had it good where I was before, and then I landed in Chicago in a crazy turn of events this summer, and I couldn't be happier. I mean, I still remember the first day I rolled up to the United Center where the Blackhawks play, and Will Chuckerman met me at the gate, one of the guys in the communications department, and handed me a ton of Blackhawks swag, gave me a giant hug, and gave me the grand tour and introduced me to everybody. And I felt like in a matter of 2 hours that I had been there forever. So it's unbelievable. I couldn't be happier there, and I'd like to stay there for quite some time.
So, Nick, I've had experience being the handheld operator on an NHL game in between the benches. And it was kind of a different experience for me, not only the odor, but just seeing everything that happens at ice level and the intensity these guys have. What's it like for you as the rinkside reporter on an NHL game?
Yeah, it's funny. I tell people all the time that you watch hockey games very differently depending on what your role is. And I've kind of been that guy in a lot of senses. I've coached it, I've played it. I've been a play-by-play announcer for it. I've been a color guy for it. I've been a host, and now I get to add, rinkside reporter to it. And you watch the game differently. There are things that you see when you're watching it casually that you don't see when you're watching it detailed, and vice versa. And then you put emotion in it and take emotion out. But for me, I'm lucky to be on a broadcast that is iconic. Like, my two partners are legends. I mean, Pat Foley, our play-by-play announcer, is a Hockey Hall of Famer. He's one of the all-time greatest voices in all of sports, let alone the NHL. And his partner, my partner, is Eddie Olczyk, who anybody in hockey knows and loves and listens to and trusts. So,
Right.
As a rinkside reporter, my job is to add to the broadcast and to fill in where maybe those guys don't have some information. So my job becomes a little trickier because those guys are so good and they're so entertaining and they're so thorough that I watch the game with a microscope, trying to pick up little things or add to what Eddie has done in terms of his analysis of the game, or what Foles has done in terms of entertainment. But it's been fun, and it's been a challenge for me in a different way to come up with those stories and to bring things to the table that complements what Foles and Edzo are saying. But it's also a blast for me because I get to be on a broadcast with two icons and legends. And, as much as I fell in love with the organization and felt right at home, I felt the same way on the broadcast. Pat and Edzo brought me in and made me feel like I was part of the family right away. And that makes it easy to do my job because, I'll be honest with you, for the first time in the 25 years that I've been a broadcaster, I was intimidated a little bit to be on that show in that city with those fans, with that team. I mean, you've got a top three market. You've got two absolute legends on the broadcast. You're in a city that adores their sports teams and their broadcasters. So,
and they're highly critical.
They are. They are, and rightfully so. They've earned the right to be. So for me to step into that city, that market, that team, that broadcast, I remember the first broadcast. in early October, October 4th, I believe it was, I took the microphone in my hand like I've done, I don't know, tens of thousands of times over the course of my career. And I actually had to take a deep breath. And you always have that flutter,
Sure.
right? You always have that, I don't know, anticipation. It's not an anxiety because it's a good feeling. But you always have that, no matter, when that 10 count comes in your ear and the red light's on, you always feel that little flutter in your heart. At least I always do. And I think that's probably a good thing. But yeah, I think that day in the United Center, the anthem had just been belted out, which is a legendary thing to have happen there, Jim Corneliuson. And then to have Eddie and Pat throw it to you for the first time, it was just like, oh boy, okay, here we go. Do your job, get your words out, be quick, and get it back up to the boys before the action starts. So
Yeah.
I was visibly and physically nervous my first time on the air with those guys.
Well, and it helps too that, and I'll say this because anybody who knows you, Nick, you are a huge NHL or hockey guy. So it obviously helped that is your passion, but where does that passion come from? I know you grew up playing hockey. So walk me through a little bit of that and then how you got into broadcasting.
Yeah, I grew up playing. So I grew up in Detroit, a little city outside of Detroit, actually about 20 minutes west of downtown Detroit proper, called Plymouth, which is nearer to Ann Arbor if you're familiar with the University of Michigan. So I grew up playing hockey. I started at I can't even remember beginning. I see the pictures, but I started skating at a young age and started playing hockey, and I loved it. Fell in love with it. Played pretty competitively all the way up until I was about 15 years old, and then I got hurt. And when I got hurt, I was devastated because as a kid, all you're thinking of is you want to play in the NHL and you want to play hockey. And so for me, it was, okay, we'll figure it out. Find work the problem. And for me, that was trying to figure out how to stay involved in the game of hockey. Well, my high school had a radio station, 88.1 FM, WSDP, and we also had a junior team that played in the same building that I played in as a kid, a junior team that I probably would have played for. And I talked to them and the radio station simultaneously into letting me broadcast those games. And I did that for a little while and then moved up to Fox Sports Radio, which announced a higher level league in the same building. And then after that, I was on Fox Sports Detroit for a while and covering hockey a little bit, but
And
this
how
is where
old were you?
well, let's see. I started broadcasting when I was 15. I was announcing games in the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League, when I was 17, 18. So junior, senior year of high school, and then graduated high school and was one more year on Fox Sports Radio. And then I was switched over to Fox Sports TV. And that's when the path kind of split me off from hockey for a little while. I ended up moving to Los Angeles and working in voiceovers, and then ended up landing with an Olympic style channel. It was called WCSN at the time, and that turned into Universal Sports, which turned into basically NBC Sports, the Olympic side of things. And I did that for quite a while, and then I was there for 13 years, and then ended up back in hockey. Finally, it took forever, but I've just been back in hockey now for the last 3 years. So I was away from it for a while, and it was tricky because it was always a struggle to get back to the game of hockey, the game I loved. I stayed involved with it. I coached it, and I still played a little bit, and I did things here and there, and I tried to get in where I could, but it's hard. You think about it, Don. There's right now, there are only 31 of my jobs available in the world in the NHL. There's about to be 32, but everybody that does the job in the NHL is, you think of how tough it is to make the NHL as a hockey player. You got to be the top of your game. You got to be really good. You got to be consistent. Well, the same thing goes for broadcasters. You better be good. You better be consistent, and you better know what you're talking about. And I think that having played the game and having been around it for so long and having the trust of so many big names in the hockey world definitely puts me in an advantageous spot, because I'm able to talk about it very openly and very honestly, and I can do that pretty confidently. And I think that helps me do my job.
There's two things based on what you just said that I'd like to take it. Two directions, I should say. One is the opportunity and or missed opportunities and or trying to make your way, because it doesn't just happen that you get from one place to the other. Or I could take it the other place, relationships, which I think I want to go the first route first. Because you told me a story a few times that we've talked over the years that we've known each other, where you were in LA and you had basically given up. It was Christmas time, so tell us how that chance meeting affected your career.
When I was in Michigan, I was rising quickly. I was a 15-year-old on the radio, suddenly on Fox Sports Radio, which was a major radio station, AM radio station in Detroit. And I was writing for the Detroit Free Press. And I was on TV every couple of days, even when I was doing radio. And so I was on sort of this. It was a little bit of a meteoric rise, and I was doing the one thing that you're not supposed to do, and you're reading your own press. And I started to believe that, wow, okay, well, maybe it's time to move on. Maybe it's time to jump out of Detroit. And I think I jumped a little faster than I probably should have. Looking at it in retrospect, I took a big leap and I left Michigan at a very young age. I was 21 years old, and I moved to Los Angeles. And you go from being a big fish in a little pond to being an absolute minnow in ocean. And that's where I found myself in LA. And the reality hit hard. It was difficult to find work. It was difficult to even get a interview. It was difficult to get an agent. It was difficult. All of these different things were kind of smacking me down. And, I moved to Los Angeles in 2005. And I basically struggled. I was picking up a little bit of voiceover work here and there, but wasn't really able to get in any big productions, wasn't really able to get any gigs. Like I was coaching hockey on the side to make a little bit of money and doing lessons and things like that. And picking up voiceover work here and there. But it was a struggle and ran out of money. In 2007, it was Christmas Eve. I'm sorry, 2000. It was 2006 Christmas Eve. And I was flying back to Detroit, and I had basically resolved that I was going to fly to Detroit and talk to Fox Sports and see about maybe getting my gig back in Detroit. And I went to the hotel, the bar in LAX, and my flight was delayed. It was Christmas Eve. I wasn't going to make it home till like 1 a.m. Christmas Day. So I was just down and out. And I remember I ordered a Jack and Coke. And I sat down at the bar, and I wasn't even sure my credit card would ring through to pay for the Jack and Coke. In my mind, I was already concocting, and you know me well, I was already concocting the story on how I was going to get out of paying for that drink. And a lady came up and sat down next to me and just saw that I was kind of down in the dumps and struck up a conversation. And basically, her and her husband were boarding a flight to go home as well. And the gentleman overheard me talking to his wife about the fact that I was out of work and looking for a job and et cetera, and that I was a sportscaster and that I used to do hockey and snowboarding. Well, the guy starts laughing and he looks at me and he goes, "You're serious?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm serious." And he goes, "I was just telling my wife in the car ride over here to the airport that I'm stressed out because by the first of the year, I've got to find a hockey and snowboarding play-by-play announcer for this sports network that we're running." And sure enough, that gentleman was the executive producer of what was then WCSN, World Championship Sports Network, which turned into, as I was saying earlier, Universal Sports and NBC Sports. And I basically got hired in the bar over a Jack and Coke on Christmas Eve in 2006 and started working for them the second week of January 2007.
Sometimes you just need that divine intervention at times. And, this is a hard business to be in, and you know that better than anybody, Nick. So, because it is not a direct path sometimes how we want it. You said just a few minutes ago that you were a rising star and you go and now you're this little minnow and things don't work out. So how much does tenacity play into this industry for anyone who wants to be on the air?
Tenacity is the most essential quality that you can have in this business, and being resilient and I was told a long time ago by a very, very talented man. He's passed away now, Jerry Weintraub. You probably heard that name, but you don't know him too well. He was a legendary manager for a long time. He managed John Denver. He managed Frank Sinatra in his revival. He produced a bunch of films, produced Ocean's 11. He was really good buddies with Matt Damon and George Clooney and Brad Pitt and that group of people. And he basically told me, he goes, kid, he goes, if you want to make it in this business, he goes, you're going to hear the word no all the time. And I said, okay. He goes, you got to get comfortable with the word no.
I know you believed it, but you didn't want to believe it.
I didn't want to believe it
Yeah.
because you got to be your own biggest fan. So, he asked me, he told me, he goes, you're going to hear no all the time. And I said, okay. He goes, you got to turn the no into a maybe. And then once you get him to say maybe, then you got him. Then you turn that maybe into a yes. So resilience, persistence, tenacity, all of those things are huge. I did. I heard the word no all the time, all the time. Still hear the word no quite a bit, more than I'd like. But you've got to be able to stay with it. You've got to be able to not get down on it. You've got to understand that there are things in this business that are going to happen out of your control and that you have to push through those and rise above them. And that this is not a sprint to make it in this business. It is absolutely a marathon. And if you can hold on and if you can last and if you can stay your course, then and stay true to who you are and not be one of those people that cheats their way into this, then you can for sure make it. But I think that a lot of people get weeded out, whether they want to be an actor or a producer or a broadcaster or whatever. I think they get weeded out by giving up too early. And that's the best advice that I give to a lot of young people that come to me is you got to stay with it and you got to walk before you run. So many kids now in this business, they'll reach out to me and they're just out of high school or they're just out of college and they want a job in the NHL. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. Like, you got to go work in the little markets. You got to go take the hits. You got to go do the jobs that you don't necessarily want to do in order to get the job you want, because nobody gets to jump 10 rungs on the ladder. I don't care how good you are or how good you think you are. You better put in the work. You better hone your craft. You better stay tenacious, and you better work really hard. Nobody in life gets exactly what they thought they were going to get, but if you work really hard and you're kind, amazing things normally happen. And I've tried to live by that motto.
All right, relationships. Now, I know most people know that those are important in life in general, so we won't talk about the importance of relationships. What I'd like to ask you about, because this is one thing I think you excel at, and that is developing relationships and making contacts and building those friendships that can last a lifetime, and so what is it for you that has been successful in first making that relationship and then building it and then maintaining it?
Yeah, listen, the world is a small place, and the 6 degrees of separation are huge. So I think it first goes back to just being a good person. I like people. I like being around people. I like talking to people. I like engaging with people. I like interacting. I like all of those things. I'm a sociable guy. I like to be out and about. I like that kind of thing. So relationships for me are important just because I think that this world at times is a real shitty place, and you've got to be a good person. You got to be nice to everybody you meet because you never know what they're going through. So I'm constantly trying to just exude that and be a good person. And I think as a result, you build relationships, and you have to keep those and you have to foster those. But I think most people can see through BS. So if you're not a good person, or if you're a fake person, or if you're doing something for personal gain, I think people see through that right away. So I just try to always be honest, and I try to always be upfront with people, and I let my character kind of come out, and sometimes that will annoy people, and sometimes that works in my favor. And if you like me for who I am, then great, I want you in my life. If you don't like me, or you don't like who I am, well, that's okay. Then chances are I'm probably not going to enjoy being around you either. So no problem. So for me, the relationship building and just being a generally good person will help you in more ways than one. It will help you when you need something. It will help you when you need to fall back on somebody. And that's not just about the relationship. That's about maintaining it and being a good person. I can't emphasize that enough. Just knowing people doesn't mean they're going to help you. You have to actually be a good person. And if that person calls you and needs something, you drop everything for them. And you do the same thing. And I think I've tried to do that a lot I've tried to do that a lot in my life. And I think that people see me for who I am. And I think that that helps. And it certainly has given me opportunities. I mean, listen, it got me this job with Chicago. I mean, I would not be with the Chicago Blackhawks if it wasn't for Eddie Olczyk being the guy to call me when things changed this summer with the Vegas Golden Knights. And Eddie Olczyk called and said, "What happened? What can we do? What's your plan? Let's figure it out together." So I owe Eddie Olczyk, my arrival in Chicago. And, he's been a friend of mine for 13 years, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for that man. And I feel the same about him and his family. They obviously came through for me in a big way, but Eddie Olczyk is one of the few people in my life that if he needed a heart and mine was a match, I'd cut it out with a butter knife and give it to him because he probably deserves it more.
That sounds like it might hurt.
It wouldn't feel great, but for Eddie, I'd do it.
Well, and talking about those relationships with hockey and even in, the entertainment industry, you've developed some interesting relationships, I shall say. You went to a wedding in Slovenia. You've been on jets with some very, very high level people. How is it to get those types of relationships?
Well, those always surprise me. I think again, it comes back to just people want to be around good people. The hockey world is very small. The hockey world is very close. So a lot of it has to do with that. Two of my very best friends are pretty big guys in the NHL. Anze Kopitar, who's the captain of the Los Angeles Kings, and Justin Williams, who was the captain of the Carolina Hurricanes. I'd known Justin since we were kids, and I've known Kopi for, 13 years now as well. So having those relationships just comes from being a hockey person. And those guys are guarded. Those guys are always guarded because they're celebrities and they're in the public eye. And, people want, of course, to be around them. But I think anytime guys like that lower their guard and let you in and be part of their inner circle, then people who are attached to that circle look and say, well, okay, that guy's vouched for by those guys, so that guy must be a good guy. That goes a long, long, long way in the hockey business. The hockey business is super small and super close. And if you are a hockey player and have those types of relationships, then pretty much anybody who's a hockey player looks at you and says, okay, well, if those guys like him, we got to like him because he's those guys wouldn't have him in their circle if he wasn't a good guy.
Speaking of Justin Williams, you're working with World Team Tennis. They have a social media show that you're hosting called Up Next that is, I think, carrying most people who are fans of tennis through this COVID situation. What is your work like with World Team Tennis first, and then we'll come back to Justin Williams?
Well, there you go. There's another relationship. So Carlos Silva, who is the CEO and president of World Team Tennis, was at one point, a high-level person with Universal Sports and World Championship Sports Network when I got started back in 2007. That fateful day in the airport brought me to those people and connected my dots with Carlos. And all those years later, 13 years later, Carlos and I remained close and remained friends. So when he took over World Team Tennis last summer, he called me and said, "Hey, I'd love to work with you again on air. Would you please come aboard and be a reporter for us on CBS during the matches?" And I said, "Absolutely, I would love that." And this is my second year now with World Team Tennis, and God bless Carlos Silva, because he has a business model that is not only going to play this summer, but that is also paying all of his employees still through this COVID situation that we're in. So, again, it draws back on relationships, but I've loved being with World Team Tennis in the summertime. It's given me an opportunity to cover a sport that I've loved from afar for a long time, and I've dabbled in terms of playing, and then just the opportunity to get to work with Carlos again is a huge honor. These are people who are immensely important to me in my life. Eddie Olczyk, Carlos Silva. I mean, these are guys that have given me opportunities when I needed it most. So I feel very fortunate to be a part of it. I feel very fortunate to know these guys, and I feel also a significant obligation to make them proud and to do well by them, because they've clearly trusted me with their brands and their products and their reputation. So World Team Tennis is great. I mean, it's also a lot of fun because it's men and women playing on the same team. You've got mixed doubles. It's team tennis.
Mixes the entertainment value in there.
Oh yeah, and it's not like a Wimbledon or a U.S. Open or a French Open where it's quiet and stuffy and tiptoeing. I mean, they got music playing in between serves. They've got cheerleaders. They got fans screaming. You got players looking for the crowd to pump them up a little bit. It's a ruckus environment. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's fun to watch.
I mean, oh gosh, and it's fun to be at. I walked in, you have this preconceived notion of what tennis is, and then you step into a world team tennis arena and you're like, oh, this is fantastic. This is everything you love about tennis coupled with everything you love about, an NFL game and an NHL game or a Major League Baseball game.
So the Up Next show, how did that come about, and what have you done so far with it?
Yeah, I mean, geez, let me just tell you this. I think we're all in this weird spot of trying to figure out how to churn out content. We all want to work, right? Like, Don, you're in the entertainment business. Like, how it is. You want to do stuff. You're not good at sitting idle. I'm not good at sitting idle. So for me, it was, okay, well, let's all put our heads together and figure out a way that we can have conversations, reach out to our fans, give them content to watch, because if they're like the rest of us, they've already blown through Netflix and all of the streaming services, and they've binged everything they can binge. So I was on the phone with Carlos and our producer JT, and said, hey, what could we do? And the producer JT, he's a producer in the NHL for the New York Islanders, so we got that connection too. And he said to me, he goes, well, why don't we do an interview show? I go, okay, that sounds good. He goes, well, let's talk about people that we know that we can get. I said, okay, that sounds good. Let's do that. And so we started listing off all the people that we knew: celebrities, newsmakers, athletes, commentators. And all of a sudden we had this big list of people, and we all looked at each other on the Zoom, and we were like, oh yeah, we can make a show out of this. So it's awesome. Next Up with Nick Gismondi airs every Friday at noon Eastern time on Facebook and Instagram and on the World Team Tennis site. And it's basically a 15-minute conversation between me and a celebrity, a sports star, a newsmaker. And we talk a little bit about life. We talk a little bit about tennis. We talk a little bit about what they're doing to get through this moment. And it's been a ton of fun. We've taped 4 episodes, and they've all been with people who I absolutely adore, and it's just been a ton of fun.
Who are some of the guests, and who are upcoming guests, if you can share that?
Yeah, first guest we had was it was a fun one. I went to the well, and I know you were getting at it earlier, but Justin Williams, he was a good buddy of mine. So Justin came on, and he was our first interview. I also just reconnected with my broadcast partner on speed skating, Dan Jansen, who won gold in 1994 at the Olympics there in the 1,000 meters. So he and I had a conversation. And next Thursday is a really a special one for me. I'd never met this man before, but being a hockey guy, we knew of each other. We hadn't crossed paths, but Mike Eruzione, the captain of the Miracle on Ice Team USA team that beat the Soviets, and I speak. So next week's episode, Dan Jansen just aired today, but you can still see it on World Team Tennis. But the next episode is next Friday, and that'll be Mike Eruzione. So, and then we got some other big names coming up.
Elizabeth Shue as well.
Elizabeth Shue's coming up. Elizabeth Shue, and a significantly well-known big name politician is coming up also.
Interesting.
I've not done any political interviews before, but this will be a fun one for me.
Well, it's fun to see that networks are getting creative without sports, and still trying to cater to the fans. When we are back to sports, or even before this whole COVID thing, how do you reach out, or how do you make that connection with fans? Because I know that when you were in Vegas with the Golden Knights, you had a lot of fan engagement type things you did. So how does that play into the way you approach your job, understanding that the fans make up the significant portion of a team's success?
Well, they do, and that was especially true in Vegas, and it's especially true in Chicago. I went from one major fan base to another major fan base. It makes me feel real good when you get those messages from, I still get messages from fans in Vegas, and I connected quickly with the fans in Chicago, and that was huge because that's a big part of it's the biggest part of what I do, to be honest. I mean, you're doing this for them. They're the ones that are watching. They're the ones that are consuming the content that you're creating. You're doing it for them, essentially. So for me, when I broadcast, I try to talk to the viewer, not at them. I think the biggest compliment that I get from people that means the most to me is when they come up to me and they say they feel like they know me, and they feel that when I'm doing something on television, I'm talking right to them. And that's my goal. My goal is to always connect with them through the television, but also in person. I get stopped in the United Center all the time, and I'll talk to people as long as they'll listen to me, or unless I have to go, get to my position and do my
Right.
reports. But I enjoy that, and I love that, and I'm glad that people feel comfortable with coming up and saying hi and having a conversation or reaching out to me on social media. I respond to every message I get, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's on Facebook, whether it's on Instagram. If somebody sends me a message, I get back to them. I will respond to everything that people send to me, because I think that's important. But the connection is important. It's huge, and it means the most to me. And if I can listen, I didn't get into this business to be famous or to be a celebrity or to get paid whatever. I didn't. That's not. I did this because I love talking about the game of hockey. I love talking about sports, and I love connecting with people. And you know, if something that I'm doing can bring some joy to somebody's life for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is, well then awesome. I'm doing my job. And if I can use a platform and that connection with fans to help other people out or to draw attention to something or to be a beacon of hope or positivity, well, that's exactly what I'm doing this for. It's an awesome job. It's a lot of fun. It's super cool, and I enjoy it, and I don't take it for granted. But I also have the perspective of appreciating that everybody that watches and the fans that tune in and the spectators, they're the reason why we're doing this. And I try to make sure they know that I'm giving it my all every time I'm on TV.
Well, it seems to be working for you because you've been nominated for 3 Emmys, and those are industry awards. So that's good. I primarily as a host, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but a reporter as well. Now, you're not just a host and a reporter. You also do announcing. And I know, having worked with you at Universal Sports / Olympic Channel / NBC Sports, you have to be versatile with what you're covering. And one moment that sticks out always with me, and you know what this is when you mentioned him earlier with Dan Jansen. We were producing speed skating, and during one of the commercial downtimes that we had, we were talking about German accents, and then it went into Russian accents. So if you can, just real quick, give me your best
Yeah.
Japanese accent.
My best Japanese accent. Well, do you want the German first, though, right?
Oh, German first, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
So
see here.
He's lining up against his opponent, let's say.
Yeah. We're here in the oval, getting ready to do the speed skating. Yeah, the German skater Hans, he comes to the line, and he's ready to take the line and do the skating.
And then when we were in there, and the Japanese guy came to skate, I said, okay, let's hear your Japanese accent, and it was.
Yeah, it's this one's a little trickier though. You got to warm up for it, but the Japanese accent is very much the same. It's yeah. Here's the Japanese guy. Yeah, he's going to come to the line as well and do his skating. Yeah. And they sound very similar.
And I remember that because it was a taped show. You and me and Dan Jansen could not stop laughing for like 15 minutes on that.
The thing about all that was it was like 3:00 in the morning or something too, right? Like we would record all of these things because these international shows, they would come in at zero dark 30, right? And
Yeah.
you're groggy and you're sleep deprived and you're a little bit punchy. And so, Dan was teasing me about that my German accent was good. And he told me to try to do a Dutch accent.
Yeah.
And so I tried to do the Dutch, but the Dutch came out just like the German. And then it became a running joke. So he would throw all these different nationalities at me and say, do that accent. And I would just do it in the German accent. And it was a bit of an inside joke, but it would get us all laughing
And just to be
hard.
clear, had nothing to do with making fun of anything. It's
Oh
just the
God, no,
way it
yeah,
came
no.
out. You were trying to do it sincerely, and it just sounded the same. So
I couldn't do it. I mean, I'm Italian. My dad came here from my dad came here from Italy when he was in '54 and did the whole, stayed on Ellis Island for 2 weeks. And I've tried desperately to do the Italian accent and it comes out German. So I don't know why I can do German. I'm not sure where that came from. There's not a stitch of German in our family lineage, but for some reason I can nail the accent.
yeah. All right. So as far as announcing goes, how do you prepare for that, for announcing something maybe you've never called? And then what do you think your future is as a play-by-play announcer?
Well, listen. I started in play-by-play. I love play-by-play, but it's funny. I think when I got started, I thought, well, you know what, you're going to be a play-by-play guy, but then you realize you got to be versatile a little bit. You got to do wherever the work is at, and so for me, it's funny. I've actually fallen in love with the host, the reporting sides of things. I mean, listen, if opportunities ever presented themselves, I mean, I'd certainly entertain play-by-play again, but. I think a lot of this gig is being able to be tenacious and have something that you want in the future, but also enjoying where you're at, loving the moment and living in the moment. And for me, I mean, that's where I'm at right now. I don't know what the play-by-play future holds for me. I might not ever do play-by-play again, but I know that I love where I'm at right now. And I know I love who I'm with right now. And if that means staying in the moment and being who I am, and then that's great. I'm happy to do that. And to your other point, in terms of how do you prepare for things you've never covered before? I mean, when we were at Universal Sports, the Olympic Channel, and NBC Sports, I was our utility guy. Like, I got thrown on stuff. I'm like, I don't know how to announce badminton. Like, I've played it in my backyard with a beer in my hand at a barbecue, but I've never announced it. So it's like it just becomes an excessive amount of homework. I mean, gosh, for broadcasts that I would do for us sports I'd never covered. I mean, you're talking about, 12, 18 hours of homework for a 45-minute broadcast, because you're boning up on rules, on players, on history, on language, on what is the words that they use, so you don't sound like you're filling in. You don't want people to, especially with sports that we were doing rarer sports that only diehards of those sports were tuning in for, like
Right.
curling or diving or badminton or track and field. It's not like the NHL or the NFL or MLB or NBA where the casual viewer might watch and not. No, these sports were so specific that you had to really make sure you knew what you were talking about. And, I took a lot of pride in that, and I did a lot of homework. I went through probably a million pads of loose leaf paper and note cards and printed stuff off. So, there was a lot of homework that went into it. And I think that, for anybody that's aspiring to be a broadcaster, the devil is in the details. The scariest place in the world for somebody who's in sports television is to be in front of a camera with nothing to say.
All right. That said, then, we've heard a lot from other announcers, reporters on how they approach their work. What do you think makes a good producer when it comes to working with announcers?
That's a key element. I've been lucky to work with some incredible producers over the course of my career, yourself included. I can think of my most recent experiences with my producer who was with me in Vegas for 2 years, Braden Greiser, and my producer who was with me in Chicago this year, Mitch Kersner. These are people who are exceptional at their job, and it's based on their calmness, their preparedness, and their communication. And for me, there were moments in Vegas where things were changing at such a rapid pace that we would be 10 seconds before air, And my producer would get in and he'd say, hey, the B block is now the A block. Walk you through this. And that's a huge trust, right? That's a huge trust because nobody really sees the behind the scenes. Nobody sees the fact that the producer's working a zillion times harder than the rest of us. But that producer, deserves a lot of the credit. However, if something screws up on that side of things and it comes out wrong on my end, I'm the guy that looks like
Yeah.
the one that screwed up. Whether it's a graphic or whether you're talking over the wrong thing. So there's a huge trust factor that plays into this, and that's developed through relationship as well. But as long as that producer is part of the team, and that's an important thing. I've never liked producers who thought they were above it all, and they were, the producer is the leader. But the best leaders for me are the ones that work with the people that they're leading. So I loved the collaboration that I had with Braden in Vegas, and I love the collaboration that I have with Mitch in Chicago. Mitch and I sit down 2 hours before a game, and before that, even we sit down together at morning skate and we talk through stories and we talk through ideas, and he bounces things off me and what he wants to do in the broadcast, and maybe we could do this graphic. And Mitch Kersner is a legend. He was the executive producer of Hockey Night in Canada for a long time, one of the biggest hockey productions ever. So for a guy like him, who I consider to be an icon in the producing industry, is talking to me and valuing my opinion and asking me for advice, like that makes me feel like a big part of the team. And I trust him, and him. And I think the thing that people have to remember is that this is a person who is in your ear talking while you're talking. Like when you're a sports broadcaster, you got a mic in your hand and you got your earpieces in and you're listening to the broadcast and you're listening to your own voice. And while that's all going on, you got a director and a producer talking to you too, telling you what's next, telling you what's in screen. And there was a lot of times this year when I didn't have a monitor, and I would throw to video and talk over video, and Mitch would be in my ear telling me what shot the viewer was seeing, and then I was just trusting him and relating it because I had seen it before we went on air. So it's an inherent amount of trust. So I think a good producer is somebody that can communicate and collaborate and just be ready and prepared. And I've been very, very lucky to have to work with some amazing producers over the course of my career.
Changing gears slightly, and I only have a few more minutes with you, but you come from a military family, and there's a lot of things that you do to support those causes. What is the sports landscape with someone who's in the military? There's a lot of support for military for the sacrifices they make, but it's also very team-oriented as well. How do those two different entities mesh together in society?
Well, it's family for me, right? So I grew up in a military family. Dad was in the military, uncle, grandpa. Now my brother serves, my cousin serves. So the lessons that I've learned from being around all of these folks in the military is that it is family, it is team, it is bond, it is make sure you're taking care of the guy to the left, the right, the front, and the back of you. And I feel a lot of that same sort of camaraderie, bond, family, togetherness in the sport of hockey and in broadcasting as I see them. Obviously, very different. Nobody's life is on the line, on a sports broadcast. But I try to take those values that my father and my brother and my military family members instilled in me, and then I try to apply that. Like, I will look out for you if you're on my team, if you're in my family, and if you're on my team, you are my family. And for me, family means everything. So I try to treat it like that. And I try to treat the broadcast like that. There's nothing I wouldn't do for you, who I've worked with for a long time. There's nothing I wouldn't do for Pat Foley or for Eddie Olczyk or for anybody in the Blackhawks organization. And I think that athletes see that as well too, on the military standpoint. And they're always welcoming. I remember this season, earlier in the season, my brother was home on leave and came out to visit me in Chicago. And the Blackhawks found out that he was coming out, and they went way above and beyond out of their way, the communications department, to make him feel special and welcome. They gave him the best seats. They had him covered on his food and his drink. They gave him a jersey with his name on it. I mean, it was it moved me to tears, to be honest with you, to see the way that these guys had known me for, at that point, 3 months. I'd been in the organization for 3 months. And my brother came in as a Marine veteran, and they treated him like he was the president of the United States. And it's stuff like that that makes me very prideful, and it's stuff like that that also makes me very happy that I'm where I'm at with Chicago, because you treat anybody like that, you're good in my book.
It's a special bond that, I can only imagine what it's like. So, thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. What would you like people to know about what you do that they might not otherwise know?
Wow, that's a hard question.
It's kind of broad, and I know I just kind of stuck it out there. I probably should have prepped you for it. But what goes into what we do as broadcasters that you would like people to know that maybe they don't think about?
Yeah, listen, it's a fun job and it's a cool job, and I think anybody that meets me knows and says that, and I do know that, and I do appreciate that. But it's also a hard job. Doing what we do, it's not easy. It takes a lot of homework. It takes a lot of prep. It takes a lot of reps. It takes a lot of studying and back work, and there's just a lot that goes into it. So don't just think that broadcasters roll in an hour before a game and get to just watch a cool sporting event. There's actually like a lot that goes into it, and it's a mental drain. I know at the end of a broadcast that when I get back home and you sit down in the quiet for a minute, you're just kind of like, oh boy, like you're exhausted, not physically, because it doesn't physically demand much of you, but mentally it's a grind. And I think that's important to know.
For somebody young who might be trying to do what you do, what's the best advice that, one, you've been given, and two, that you would give?
Hey, just experience means everything. I mean, experience means everything from as young of an age as you can get it. Nobody has ever once asked me where I went to college. They all want to know what you've done and where you've been and how you've been on air, and then they want to know how you're doing in that space. So if you're a young aspiring broadcaster, start getting your reps in now. And you can get on a radio station, you can do an internship, but geez, I started broadcasting. I would, this was before the internet was even around. Like I would get the morning paper, and I'd sit in my living room in Plymouth, Michigan, and I would fold the paper so that I had the roster of the Detroit Red Wings and the roster of the team that they were playing that night. And I would sit in front of the TV with the game on mute, and I would just announce it. I would just call the action, and I would get used to the speed of it, and I would get used to filling the empty space with words when you needed to, and being creative with it. So for me, the best advice that I can give anybody that wants to get into this business is get as much experience as you can, even if you manufacture it on your own.
Nick, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I obviously knew more stuff than many of my listeners, but I felt it was really important to share a lot of what you've experienced, because it can be a quick path, and it can be a quick path that gets interrupted, and it can be a very, very slow path. And I feel like you kind of embody every single one of those. And it's been nice sharing that time with you. And, I look forward to what you're able to achieve in your future career.
It has been an interesting, wild ride, stressful at times, fun at others, but it's definitely brought a ton of people into my life, you included, which I cherish, because not only did I get to work with you for a long time, but I also get to have you as a friend, and it's that kind of thing that I think is the hidden rewards of what we do for a living. And I'm also glad I finally made the crack in at the podcast. I was seeing the episodes tick off. I was getting a little nervous you weren't going to call me.
No, timing is everything in this business, right?
Listen to you, that a boy. Keep spoken like a true producer.
All right, Nick. Well, I appreciate the time.
Thanks, Don. Be well. See you soon.
All right, that was Nick Gismondi, current host and reporter for World Team Tennis on CBS, and the Chicago Blackhawks rinkside reporter for NBC Sports Chicago. It's always great to see my friends and colleagues progress in the sports business, especially those who are on air. We often see them as being polished, having a good time with their fellow announcers and the athletes and some of the cool sports shows they're a part of. but we don't often get to hear how they got there, some of the struggles that are out of their control, and some of their experiences throughout their careers. For Nick, I've seen or been a part of his growth, and I can say that he's one to watch in the coming years, especially for hockey and NHL fans. Thanks a bunch to my buddy Nick Gismondi, or Gizmo, for joining me here on Sports in the Making. On the next Sports in the Making, I'll talk with Dan Lyle, director of AEG Rugby, former U.S. national team and international rugby player, USA Rugby Hall of Famer, and NBC Sports rugby analyst. We'll talk about the game and the history of rugby, what rugby is like on the international scene, and what it takes to grow rugby in the United States. It's a sport that many people have seen but don't completely understand, so I'm looking forward to sharing some time with Dan and finding out more about rugby. That's on the next episode of Sports in the Making. If you have any suggestions on what you'd like to know more about in sports, drop me a line at sportsinthemaking.com or contact me on Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, I'd love to include them in a future episode with your name. Wherever you listen to this podcast, I'd appreciate it if you like it, share it, and leave positive reviews on your social media channels. Also be sure to subscribe to Sports in the Making so you don't miss out on more episodes and you can catch up on previous ones there as well. I'm your host, Don Cardona. Thank you for listening to Sports in the Making.